morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. We hope you're all having a nice summer and hopefully staying safe during this very hot and rainy weather we've been having. We are excited to welcome you to our July webinar, where we'll be talking about special needs trusts and ABLE accounts. And we often get this question, do I need a special needs trust or do I need an ABLE account? And often the answer to that question is going to be dependent on the types of benefits you receive, how much money you may be getting. But in many cases, utilizing both of these tools is really going to help maximize the resources available to someone to help them reach their financial goals. Before we jump in, I want to run through a couple of quick housekeeping items. Everyone is muted by default. So that we can limit any sort of background noise. And we have disabled the chat. On my own today, for those of you who have attended some of our past trainings, we usually have another staff member managing our Q&A. So be patient with me. I will do my best to respond to questions, as many as we can at the end of today's session. So please enter any questions you have into the Q&A. We've also enabled closed captioning. So please turn that on your end if you'd like to receive the closed captioning for today's session. And a link to the materials will be sent out 24 hours from today. You'll receive it tomorrow by email. I have also dropped a link to those materials within the chat. I'm going to do that again right now. If you'd like to download them now, you can go ahead and click that link and get them before the email tomorrow. A recording of this session will be available on our website at nicearktrustservices.org/webinars. And after the session, you will be prompted with a link to complete a brief survey. Please fill that out and let us know about any feedback you have on today's session. All right, so people with disabilities who receive supplemental security income benefits, Medicaid, and other sorts of means-tested government benefits can only have a certain amount of money in their name and qualify financially to receive these vital services. Some examples of the means-tested benefits are things like SSI, which provides cash payments to someone who's generally not able to work and has low or limited financial resources, and it's intended to help pay for things like food and shelter. Medicaid benefits can also be means-tested. It's generally based on either having a very low income and resources, or if you're eligible for certain waiver programs, are specific income and resource limits, amount of money you can have in your name, and qualify to receive Medicaid for health benefits and even long-term care services. There's also other sorts of means-tested benefits that you're only eligible for based on your financial resources. And then there are going to be benefits that are considered not means-tested. So I refer to these as earned benefits. And these are things like SSDI, that's Social Security disability income. You're receiving those payments from Social Security based on the fact that you were able to work at some point and you did earn some credit. And so those are generally, receiving money is generally not going to impact your financial eligibility for that benefit. Child disability benefits are another common benefit that someone may receive. This is if the individual was disabled prior to age 22, they may be eligible to collect on their parents' work record. They were not able to work during their lifetime, but once their parent retires or passes away, they're able to collect Social Security benefits based on their parents' income they paid into the system. And that is not generally a means-tested benefit, but often someone qualifies for that when they are also SSI related. And so the SSI is the component that could potentially cause them to have a resource limit. And oftentimes you are receiving both SSI and child disability benefits. And then of course there's Medicare benefits as well, which is another health benefit that someone with a disability may be eligible for. For example, if you have SSDI for more than 24 months, you'd be eligible for Medicare to pick up some of the costs of your expenses. Or if you're over the age of 65, you'd be eligible for Medicare benefits. And no amount of money that you receive will generally impact your financial eligibility for Medicare. Now, in 2023, if you receive SSI or Medicaid benefits, you can only have a certain amount of money in your name and qualify for these programs. A single individual receiving supplemental security income can never have more than $2,000 in their name. So if you were to come into a sum of money from a settlement, direct inheritance, could be a retroactive benefit payment from Social Security, any sort of windfall of money, it could put you over the limits to qualify for that program. It can even be nominal resources that are accruing in your bank account and putting you over that $2,000 limit. And that could come from things like wages and even perhaps unspent funds from child disability benefits. If a person only receives Medicaid services, they are not getting supplemental security income. Maybe they get Social Security disability income and Medicaid. They have higher asset limits. In 2023, they're able to keep up to $30,000 in assets. But even in those cases, many individuals might benefit from those funds being protected in a vehicle where someone can oversee the use of those funds and ensure that they're used appropriately for that individual. So even though there are allowed to have up to $30,000, some individuals may still want to be below that limit just for the support of having someone assist them in managing the funds that they may be receiving. If a person only receives Medicaid services, they also need to consider the income limits. So for SSI, you generally qualify because you have very low income. So someone who's receiving SSI benefits will almost never have income that's too high for Medicaid. But if you are just on Social Security disability income or you receive Social Security retirement income and your income exceeds $1,697 for this year on a monthly basis, you may be over the limit to qualify for Medicaid. Now, that doesn't mean that you can't access these services or keep your Medicaid benefits if your income changes and puts you over that limit. It simply means that you would need to spend down that money in order to continue to qualify for those benefits or become eligible for Medicaid services. And you can do that by depositing your excess income into a special needs trust or a pooled trust. Now, when Medicaid looks at a person's income, they're going to take into consideration all the sources of income they receive. Social Security retirement, Social Security disability, could be funds they receive from a pension, distributions from their retirement account will count as income, and even wages when an individual is participating in the Medicaid buy-in program. And they'll tell you right down to the penny the amount that you need to deposit into that account each month in order to qualify and maintain eligibility for services. Now, the important thing to know is that really there is no individual who should be sending their Medicaid spend down to Medicaid every month, because they have this option to still preserve that income, allows them to use it for things that their benefits don't provide, and it allows them to have either maintain their standard of living or give them a better quality of life by giving them more of their hard-earned income to use to pay for their expenses throughout the month. I do see a few people have their hand raised. We're not able to unmute you. We have everyone muted by default. So if you have a question, please put it into the Q&A and we will review those at the end of today's session. So when you have an individual or you yourself may be over the financial limits to qualify for these programs, you can use tools like special needs trusts and ABLE accounts to give a person a better financial future while preserving their eligibility for these benefits both now and in the future, in the case of an individual that might be planning for a loved one with a disability that may need these benefits later in life. Someone did ask if the numbers on the income slide were gross income or net income, and it is gross income. So that is important to keep in mind. Now, a special needs trust is one of the tools that can help a person stay below these financial limits. These trusts are irrevocable in order to allow someone to qualify for benefits. Once you put the funds into the trust, they become the property of the trust, and they're managed by a trustee on behalf of the person with a disability, who's known as the trust beneficiary. If we were able to just give the money back to this person or change the arrangement of the trust, Medicaid would consider that money available to them. So that is why the trust needs to be irrevocable. Okay? These trusts are allowable. It's totally legal to use these trusts to spend down assets for benefit eligibility purposes. It's allowable both under federal statute and state statute. For example, in New York State, we are one of only a few states in the country that allow you to spend down your excess income and maintain eligibility for Medicaid. So that is a New York State specific rule. And that's important to keep in mind if you are considering moving out of New York State and you have an income spend down for Medicaid purposes. The benefit with a special needs trust is that you can reduce both income and assets. And the funds you deposit into the trust are intended to supplement your benefits. So it's the purpose of the special needs trust is to allow you to qualify or maintain your financial eligibility for these benefits, and to give you more money, more financial resources that are available to you to help give you a better quality of life. There's many different types of supplemental needs trusts, and it depends on the structure of the trust. So special needs trust can be funded either with the person's own money, when a person comes into a sum of money that's in their name or that they receive directly. And that's referred to as a first party trust or a self-settled trust, where it's being funded by the individuals with a disability or the beneficiary themselves. A special needs trust can also be funded by someone other than the beneficiary. It could be a parent, grandparent, family member, could even be a charitable organization or an entity that would like to establish a trust for the benefit of someone with a disability who relies on these benefits or who might need these benefits at some point in the future. A supplemental needs trust can also be a standalone trust where you go to an attorney and draft your own trust document, and you need to select your own trustee to serve and manage the funds in the trust. A pooled trust is another type of supplemental needs trust where the documents have already been drafted. There's one document that governs the pooled special needs trust, and the trustee is a nonprofit organization. So you don't need to go and select a trustee, you get that built in to the administration of that trust. Now, special needs trusts are governed by a variety of different laws and regulations, but primarily many of the rules that that we need to follow as far as distributions from the trust are outlined in the Social Security Administration's Program Operations Manual. So that's where a lot of the guidelines come from for trustees to understand what they can and cannot use funds in a special needs trust for. The trustee that you appoint to manage the special needs trust has the final say on any sort of distributions going out of the account. They're appointed to use the funds appropriately and in the best interest of this individual. They also need to consider that certain distributions might be permitted depending on the type of benefits that a person receives. For example, someone receiving supplemental security income benefits, those benefits are intended to pay for food and shelter. So if a trustee were to buy food or shelter related items using funds in a special needs trust, it can directly reduce the amount of money that they receive in their cash payment from SSI. So those are things that are very important that the trustee understands the rules of government benefits in making distributions from the trust. What the trust can pay for can often change depending on the type of trust it is, whether it's set up by the individual themselves with their own money, or if it was funded by someone other than that person. There may be a little bit more flexibility with how the funds can be utilized. One example of that may be with funeral expenses. A first-party trust will close upon the death of the trust beneficiary, and no payments can be made out of the trust after that point. A third-party trust generally does not require any sort of payback to Medicaid. And so there may be a bit more flexibility in making disbursements, as the trust is closing. You also want to consider whether or not you want to appoint your own trustee, a family member, someone that you trust, or perhaps pursue professional administration, have someone appointed who understands these rules and who can take on the legal responsibility of serving as the trustee. And you're really weighing, the cost benefit analysis of, the expense of the professional administration versus the cost and the resources of you managing it yourself or having a loved one or, other trusted individual manage the account. The other thing to consider is what would be the investment approach. So when someone is receiving funds, it generally may benefit them to have the funds invested so that they may have opportunity to grow over time and provide a greater financial benefit to the individual. And so when you're structuring your supplemental needs trust, you want to be thinking about who is going to manage those investments and what may be your approach in investing those funds. When it comes to when to use a special needs trust or a pooled trust, you have kind of three main situations that will come up where you may consider setting up a trust. The first is if you have those excess income for Medicaid purposes, you're sending that money to Medicaid every month. You may be struggling to be able to afford your bills, or perhaps you're sending in receipts for medical expenses to meet your Medicaid spend down. And that often puts you in a position where you may not be eligible for Medicaid until a certain point in the month. That can be challenging. And so if someone has an income spend down for Medicaid purposes, they may use a pooled trust in order to qualify or maintain eligibility for those benefits. It can also help someone reduce their countable assets or income, just assets to maintain Medicaid and SSI benefits. If they come into a sum of money and used by a third party if they have funds available that they want to leave to a loved one in a way that it won't jeopardize their financial eligibility for these services. Now, as I mentioned, there are different types of supplemental needs trusts. So let's talk a little bit about some of the key aspects of each of these different types of trusts. So special needs trust can be funded either by the person themselves or by a third party. And it could be a standalone special needs trust, which is also often referred to as a D4A trust. And this is for people who are under the age of 65. So you do need to be under the age of 65 to make contributions to a standalone special needs trust. And it is going to require an attorney. The attorney is either needs to draft a trust document. In the case of a first party individual receiving money, they would need to draft a trust to receive those funds. Or in the case of a third party trust where a donor may be setting it up to be funded with proceeds from their estate, they might be drafting that trust into their will and other estate planning documents. So you are going to need to work with a legal professional, ideally someone that specializes in elder law and special needs planning, who's going to draft that document for you. That needs to be submitted to Social Security Administration or Medicaid, depending on the type of benefits you receive, for approval. The individual is going to need to select an appropriate person or entity or professional to serve as the trustee of the trust. And one of the benefits to the standalone option is that you really get the flexibility to dictate your own terms of the trust, select your own trustee, and you have a lot more control over the investments and language that's put into that trust. You can also appoint people like a trust protector, someone who may have oversight of the trust and can advocate for the beneficiary. Each year, you will need to prepare an annual tax filing for the trust. And so that is something that if the trustee is not able to do that on their own, they may need to hire out for that. And it could be a couple $100s a year. And in the case of a special needs trust, these are trusts that Medicaid and Social Security Administration allows the individual to use these funds during their lifetime and set these funds aside to be used to enhance their quality of life. But upon their death, any funds that are left in the trust would go to repay Medicaid for the services provided to them during their lifetime when it is their own money. When it is the money of a third party that funded the account, there is no payback to Medicaid. And so those funds, if there are funds left in the account after final distributions and payment of any sort of fees to the trustee, those funds could be distributed to remainder beneficiaries as named by the donor in the trust document. Now, pooled trusts are unique in that you can utilize a pooled trust at any age, and it's the only option if the individual is over the age of 65. You can no longer make contributions to a standalone special needs trust once you're over 65. So a pooled trust would be one option you could use. The documents of a pooled trust are already drafted. We have one master trust document that oversees that, the legal document that governs the trust. It's already been submitted to Medicaid and the Social Security Administration, so it's already been approved. And the individual is simply applying to join an existing program. Does not require an attorney, but we certainly always encourage you to consult with a legal professional before establishing a pooled trust. The trustee is a not-for-profit organization, and in New York State, we have to partner with a financial institution who serves as the co-trustee and manages the assets in the trust. A pooled trust can be a good fit when you have somebody that needs to open up an account quickly. Because the documents are already in place, we generally can open up an account within about 5 business days. And the cost to establish the trust is generally very low. So it only costs about couple $100 to set up a pooled trust, where a standalone supplemental needs trust may cost a couple $1,000s to have that document drafted. The individual will also get the benefits of working with a highly skilled not-for-profit organization with years of experience administering trusts, and that has years of experience with knowledge of the government benefits. So you kind of get the benefits of working with a corporate trustee or a professional trustee, with the cost savings of a pooled trust. And also, often there are much lower minimum funding requirements for a pooled trust. For example, in our program, you can open an account with as little as $300, where professional trust administration for a standalone trust may only work with people with very significant assets. This can help provide support to the family and ease you of the burden of serving as trustee, but still allow you to be actively involved in the account. You can be named as an authorized contact on the account and be an advocate to your loved one, assist them in making requests to have distributions from the trust. The funds are pooled for investment and management purposes. So that helps to spread out the costs of the trust among all the individuals who are participating in the trust. And the funds are invested as a larger pool. And so that can give someone with a small amount of money the opportunity to have potentially greater investment power by investing that money in a larger pool of assets. A pooled trust will typically manage cash-based assets only, depending on the program. There may be some programs that will manage other types of assets like real property, but in my experience, most pooled trusts generally work with cash. That doesn't mean that someone could not inherit a house and then have, whoever is in charge of managing that estate could sell that property, then the proceeds of that property could go into the pooled trust. But a pooled trust is generally not going to manage real property. And just like the standalone trust, it's the same payback provision. If it's your own money, there is a payback provision to Medicaid. If it's a third party, there is no payback to Medicaid. Now, if it's first party money, instead of repaying Medicaid, the pooled trust has the ability to retain that money and use it for individuals with disabilities that are served by their philanthropic mission. So it helps that nonprofit be able to provide other services to the individuals that they are serving. With the third party option, you would name your remainder beneficiaries in the joinder agreement. And once all final fees and distributions have been completed, the funds would go to those remainder beneficiaries as noted. Now, the special needs trust, some of the advantages of the special needs trust is that a person can have more than one trust. They may start out with their family has set up a third-party trust for them that might be funded later in their life. They may have at some point come into money themselves and needed to create their own supplemental needs trust. And they may even have a combination of a special needs trust and pooled trust. There's no limit on the amount of money you can put into a special needs trust. So no matter how much money someone has, they're able to deposit that money into a supplemental needs trust in order to maintain benefits. We generally, with supplemental needs trusts, are going to keep first-party money and third-party money separated in different trust accounts. The reason for that is because of that payback provision. You really don't want to commingle those funds. If a if the individual puts any of their own money into the trust, it could be considered a first-party trust, and then all of those funds could be subject to Medicaid payback, even the funds from third parties. So that is one thing that is unique and different about the way an ABLE account is managed. The beneficiary of the trust, as well as anyone who they authorize to submit requests on their behalf, or potentially a liaison who's appointed by the trust, can make requests to the trustee to use the funds in the account. The trustee will then distribute money to a third party to pay for eligible expenses. And that trustee can be a family member, a friend, a professional, a bank, someone, any sort of professional trustee. And it could also be a pooled trust where the trustee is a nonprofit organization. When you're choosing your trustee, it's important to understand the duties of the trustee, and you want to make sure that this person really is ready and willing to serve as trustee. We know as many parents are starting to grow older and they may be appointed as trustees of their loved one's trust, they are considering who will serve after them. And oftentimes siblings are appointed. And when the time comes for them to serve, they may not be as knowledgeable as their parents were on the government benefits. And they might also have many other things going on in their lives that they weren't necessarily facing at the time they committed to serving as trustee. There's also some strain potentially on the relationship between the trustee and the beneficiary when you're the one holding the purse strings and you have to say yes or no to certain requests. So it's very important that when you're choosing a trustee, you're thinking about all of these factors, picking someone that you trust, that you know who is going to invest the time into doing this, and that they are willing to serve as the trustee. And consider what your backup plan options are if any of those individuals are not able to serve. A trustee has to know the rules of Medicaid and SSI. They're responsible for making sure that the distributions from the trust do not have an adverse impact on a person's eligibility for any of these benefits that they receive. And they've got to be someone who's going to be very organized and detail-oriented, keeping records of everything that they're using the funds to pay for, in case they're asked to submit any sort of proof to any of the government agencies that are overseeing the benefits a person receives. They're also going to be responsible for regular communication with the account beneficiary. So it's important that they have a good rapport with that person and they have generally a good relationship. They're going to be responsible for doing tax preparation for the trust as well. So if that's not something they can do themselves, they'll be thinking about the cost of that as well as investment of the funds. They are responsible for making sure that the funds are prudently invested. And so if you yourself or whoever you're appointing as trustee is not confident in your ability to understand investments, then you may be looking to hire out for some of those services, tax preparation and investment management. When it comes to how the funds in the trust can be used, generally it can be used for anything that is for the primary benefit of that person. So most of the time it's going to be the things that we may not be able to pay for would be gifts for other people. It's got to be used for items and services that are for that person. And generally for purchases that are going to improve that person's quality of life. So we're looking to supplement their government benefits. We want to make sure that they are receiving what they should be from Medicaid and SSI and other benefits they receive, and that the funds in the trust are using for things that go above and beyond those benefits. Now, there may be examples, outliers where we would purchase things when, for example, someone's benefits are not providing that thing. But those are things that we would consider on a case-by-case basis and discuss with the beneficiary at the time of that request. All disbursements from the trust do need to be substantiated with some form of supporting documentation in the event that we are asked by Medicaid or Social Security Administration to show proof of what we spent out of the trust. We need to have detailed records that we can show to prove that it was used for that person and for an allowable expense. We can never give cash out of a special needs trust to the beneficiary, and we can never put money into a checking account for their benefit. That makes that money available to them, and it would not protect their eligibility for services. that would be treated as income to them. So we're always going to be paying third parties. You send in a bill, you ask the trust to pay, we're going to make payment directly to that vendor. You want to go out and buy something at the store, you can purchase it on a credit card, submit the credit card statement with the receipts to the trustee, and the trustee will pay off the credit card debt. Some examples of some of the most common eligible expenses are going to be personal items and services that are for that individual. Can be living expenses if they're not receiving SSI benefits. Could be vehicle, travel expenses, vacations, quality of life things, and things that are really that they want or need, right? So it's very unique to that person. What are their hobbies? What are their goals? Where do they want to be in 20 years, and how do we help them get there? So recreational, cultural experiences, could be education, also uncovered medical expenses, equipment that they may need that's not covered by Medicaid, therapy services, and even companionship services if they need someone to accompany them to go on a trip somewhere, and really so much more. The things that a special needs trust can be used for is really an endless list. It's very unique to that person. And we are always going to be considering, we want to help this money last as long as possible. So the trustee is also responsible for managing the funds appropriately and wisely to help the funds last as long as possible. Now, we went over this a little bit, but the steps to actually establish a trust are going to be a little bit unique. Again, when you're doing a standalone trust, you need an attorney to set that up for you. If it's a pooled trust, the trust documents are already approved, so you're simply applying to join the program by completing the joinder agreement. Now, a trust can be established either by the individual themselves when it's their own money, or by the donor when it's someone else's money. But if the individual is not able to establish the trust for themselves, it can also be established by someone who has the legal authority to establish it on their behalf, like a parent or grandparent, a legal guardian. It can also be a power of attorney. And in some cases, a trust may be required by a court order. Someone is receiving money and the court is directing that money to go into a special needs trust. And in very rare cases, a rep payee may have the authority to establish a trust if they're establishing it with Social Security funds only. Now, ABLE accounts are another tool that we now have available that allows us to spend down assets when someone receives these programs and gives people a vehicle to be able to save for the future. This became available in 2014 when Congress passed the Achieving a Better Life ABLE Act. And this gives us another option in addition to a special needs trust, really rather than instead of a special needs trust, right? This is another tool that we can use to help maximize the financial resources available to someone. ABLE accounts are tax advantage savings accounts. And in order to be eligible to use an ABLE account, a person must have been disabled prior to their 26th birthday. So that's very important. Some individuals may be eligible to use special needs trusts, but unless they were disabled prior to age 26, they would not be eligible to use an ABLE account. One of the unique things about an ABLE account is that it's owned by the eligible individual. It's owned by themselves, unlike a trustee and a trust taking ownership of the property in a special needs trust. And so it is managed by that individual or a designated representative who's appointed by that individual. So it's their responsibility to keep track of the records of purchases out of that account so that they can report to the IRS if they're audited in the future. And so unlike a special needs trust where you have a trustee handling that and managing that for you, this would be the responsibility of the individual for the ABLE account. The money in an ABLE account grows tax-free when it's spent on qualified disability expenses. And there's a variety of different programs. These are run by different states. So each state has its own program. I'm not sure if all 50 states at this point have a program, but there are many programs across the country. And some work with out-of-state residents. So you're not necessarily required to work with this program in your state. One difference between the ABLE account and special needs trust is you can only have one ABLE account. So if you have one ABLE account, that's your only account. If you want to move to another program, you can certainly do that. You can switch programs, but you cannot maintain two accounts. You can make contributions into an ABLE account up to $17,000 a year for this year. And since 2014, this number has gone up. I believe it started at $15,000 a year, and now in 2023, we're up to $17,000 a year. And this is from any source. So whether it's the individual's own money, the money of a third party, or even a special needs trust putting money into an ABLE account, the total amount of money going into the ABLE account in a single year can only be $17,000. There are higher limits if a person's working and they're not contributing to a retirement account. So that is one option. And ABLE accounts are intended to protect excess resources only. So if you have money accruing in your bank account and you're going over the $2,000 resource limit, you can put money into the trust. If you are receiving a large sum of, into the ABLE account. And if you're receiving a large sum of money, you can put a portion of that money into an ABLE account to spend down and get below the resource limit for Medicaid or SSI. You can also roll funds into an ABLE account from a 529 college savings account. If before the ABLE account was available, you started to use an account like that to build up some funds for your loved one to go to school. Perhaps maybe as they've gotten older, they may not be able to go to school. You do have the option to roll those funds into an ABLE account. But the ABLE account cannot be used to reduce a person's countable income for Medicaid or SSI purposes in the way that a special needs trust can. So if someone has excess income for these programs, they're going to need to put that money into a special needs trust, or in the case of SSI, it may eventually deem them ineligible for those benefits. For someone receiving SSI benefits, the account balance can never exceed $100,000. Once it goes over the $100,000 limit, every dollar over $100,000 is counted as an available resource for SSI purposes. But that is only for someone receiving the SSI benefits. I included a link here to the POMS, which is the Social Security Administration's Program Operations Manual that outlines specific guidelines for individuals receiving SSI who are utilizing ABLE accounts. And so if you are using an ABLE account now, or you intend to open one, we encourage you to review those rules if the person is receiving SSI, to learn about the ways to protect that person's eligibility for those benefits if you're managing that account. Now, here are the examples of qualified disability expenses, which is what the ABLE account is intended to pay for. Now, again, funds in the ABLE account can be used, these are very broad categories, so they can be used for things like housing and basic living expenses, transportation, education. It's got to be related to your blindness or disability, and you need to be able to make a case for that, right? But many of these things are, very broad. Health and wellness, for example. So oftentimes people will ask, could I use my ABLE account to go on vacation? You may be able to make a case that your vacation was for your health and wellness, but you can absolutely use the money in your S&T for a vacation without any question. So that might be some of what you'd be thinking about. If you have both of these tools, you really do want to be sure that when you're using the ABLE account, it's going to be for a qualified disability expense. If you make a distribution from an ABLE account that is not for a qualified expense, it could be taxable as income if you're audited by the IRS. One other unique benefit of an ABLE account is that, as we spoke about with the special needs trust, if someone receives SSI, the S&T cannot pay for food or shelter without causing a reduction in a person's SSI cash payment. Whereas the ABLE account is able to pay for housing and basic living expenses. And so an ABLE account may be a good tool to help supplement a person's rent payments or even get them into a better living situation. But it's important to note that if you're receiving SSI and you withdraw funds from your ABLE account to pay for housing expenses, they must be used within that month. Otherwise, it could be treated as an available resource to you in the following month. ABLE accounts can also be invested, like an S&T. The funds in an ABLE account can be invested, and they have the opportunity to grow over time. They can earn interest, dividends, And this allows someone to build assets so that they have savings and they can actually reach their financial goals in the future by not having to constantly keep their bank account below $2,000. The investments will vary from program to program. They're going to have different investment options. They provide a range of different buckets based on a person's risk tolerance. You don't necessarily have to invest the funds in the ABLE account either. But if you do choose to invest, then there may be fees, monthly fees based on your the assets in those investment accounts. And those fees are going to vary from program to program. And generally, most ABLE accounts only allow you to change your investments twice a year. So they're more of a kind of cookie cutter approach where you're going to be able to kind of self-direct into different buckets. And you can only make changes a couple of times a year, so a little bit less flexibility and control over the investments, but there are options to help the individual ensure that their ABLE account, has the opportunity to grow throughout the time that they're using the account. And some programs will offer an option of just having the funds, or at least a portion of the funds, kept in an FDIC insured savings account. And some will even offer a debit card feature, which gives the individual direct access to that money, which can give them flexibility to go out and do shopping and spending, have spending money available to them. And it also gives them a little bit more financial independence, but they have direct access to that money. And so it is something that anyone can get access to it theoretically. If someone asked them to give them money from the account, that's certainly something they'd be able to do. Now, the steps to set up an ABLE account will vary from program to program. And so for the purpose of today's training, we did pull some information from the New York ABLE program website just to get kind of an idea. And these guidelines are generally going to be similar from program to program with some possible minor unique differences. So in New York State, if you want to set up an ABLE account, it could be set up by the individual, someone that the individual has selected, or it could be an agent under power of attorney. Now, one important thing to note is that it's a common misconception that you can just go to any bank and set up an ABLE account, and that's not the case. An ABLE account is run by your state comptroller's office. And in order to make sure they get this program out to as many people as possible in the most cost-effective way, you generally enroll in an ABLE account online through some form of online portal. So you'd go to their website and you would apply to join the ABLE account there. If the individual does not have the capacity to establish the account for themselves, similar to a special needs trust, it could be established by a number of different individuals that are listed here. These are the specific ones for the New York ABLE program. And again, that may vary from state to state. And you're going to need some basic information about the individual who is looking to open the account. Either name, date of birth, contact information. You're going to have to give basis of their eligibility, proof that they were in fact disabled prior to age 26. And you need to make a contribution into the account. So the ABLE account, you have to deposit at least $25 to set it up. Or if you're making payroll deductions, you can make your first contribution of $15. Again, there's a link here to the ABLE account website where you can get more information. Here are some resources for individuals who are either using ABLE accounts or are considering setting up an ABLE account. If you are as I mentioned earlier, if you are receiving SSI, it's important for you to review the program operations manual to understand how payments and use of funds in your ABLE account could affect your SSI benefits. There is a great ABLE account national resource center that offers a lot of information and basic instructions. They have some really helpful videos, webinars that will help guide you in answering frequently asked questions about ABLE accounts, and also help you to compare different ABLE account programs. So they have a great tool that allows you to quickly compare different states and the differences between those programs. And you can even use a tool that will allow you to compare 3 programs side by side, so you can check out the different features. And we do encourage you to consider looking at programs all around the country, because every program is unique and may have different benefits that would work best for you. Now, Before we jump into just some examples and open things up to questions, I just want to recap some of the key differences between a special needs trust and an ABLE account. So the special needs trust, again, onset of disability can be any age. There's no age restriction on a special needs trust, but if someone is over 65, they are going to need to use a pooled trust. ABLE account, got to have an onset of disability prior to age 26. Special needs trust, you can have more than one account, which is going to be managed by a trustee. Where the ABLE account, you can only have one, and it is owned by that person. Special needs trust can protect resources and income, while the ABLE account can only be used for the excess resources. It is not going to reduce your accountable income for benefit purposes. Special needs trust, you can put as much money as you'd like into it. There's no limit on how much you can contribute and no limit on the amount you can keep in it. There's no maximum account balance. Where the ABLE account has an annual contribution limit, which may change year after year. And a person on SSI can never have a balance that exceeds $100,000. If the person only receives Medicaid, they're able to have a balance up to $520,000 in New York State, and that may change from state to state. Special needs trust investments are going to be maybe more flexible, especially if you are a standalone trust and you're in control of those investments. With a pooled trust, your investments are going to be according to the investment policy of that pooled trust. So it's important to understand what that policy is and what the kind of risk tolerance of the investments. And it's important to note that with a special needs trust, those investments do not grow tax-free. And so at the end of the year, if there is money that was earned in the trust that was not spent on the individual, that money may need to be reported on a person's personal tax return. The trust would issue a K-1 tax document providing the details you need to file that on your taxes. Whereas an ABLE account grows tax-free as long as the distributions are used for qualified disability expenses. And the last thing is the payback provision. So special needs trust, if it's the person's own money, that money would go to repay Medicaid upon their death if there's any money left in the account. Whereas with a third party, it would not go to repay Medicaid. With the ABLE account, all funds are going to be subject to repayment to Medicaid upon the death of that person. So you can certainly put third-party money into an ABLE account, but you want to ensure that that person will be able to use that money during their lifetime. Otherwise, it may be paid back to Medicaid. And so for third-party money, any sort of significant amount of assets coming from someone other than that person might be better suited for a special needs trust. All right, so we got a couple examples just to kind of bring this home for you, and we'll open things up for questions. So Sally is blind and she receives Medicaid and SSI, and she lives in a low-income apartment. Her mom recently passed away and she got an inheritance of about $200,000. So in order to maintain her eligibility for those benefits, she puts the bulk of that money is put into a third-party trust. Thankfully, her mother did go and do some planning with an attorney prior to her death so that that money did not go to Sally directly and was able to be funded in a pooled trust. And then a portion is deposited into an ABLE account. That will give her direct access to the money throughout the month, and it gives her the ability to help use it to supplement her rent payments. And then she can use the money in her special needs trust for those quality of life purchases. She intends to use it to go back to school, pay for her books, any sort of transportation she needs to get to and from classes, and maybe even to go on vacation. Robert has a developmental disability and he gets Medicaid and SSI. He lives at home with his parents and he works part-time at the local grocery store. He likes to drive himself to work and he occasionally needs money for things like gas, food, and other personal items. He does spend the money he earns each month, but despite those expenses, he still does go over the $2,000 resource limit every once in a while because he lives at home. He doesn't have a rent payment, things like that. So he has a small amount of money that he is going over that $2,000 resource limit, but on a regular basis. Now, since it's such a nominal amount of money, it might not warrant the cost of setting up a special needs trust. So he opens up an ABLE account and he's able to make periodic deposits into that bank account to offload the excess resources he's accruing in his bank account from the wages. Now, that is not going to reduce the amount of money he's earning in income in order to, get a full SSI payment, but it will allow him to offload those excess resources so he can keep his SSI benefits and his Medicaid benefits that are often linked to his SSI eligibility. The reason the ABLE account is such a good fit in this situation because it's inexpensive and it really does give him flexibility with the direct access to that money for the things he needs it for. If he goes to the gas station, he wants to buy food at the grocery store, he's able to use his ABLE account debit card for those purchases. Michael is 45. He was recently disabled in an accident and now he uses a wheelchair. He receives Social Security disability and Medicaid home care services. His Social Security disability is a little over the Medicaid limit. So he already has a pooled trust where he's depositing his excess income into that account each month in order to maintain his eligibility for benefits. Because of his accident, he's coming into a large sum of money from a personal injury settlement. And because of his age and onset of disability, he's unfortunately not eligible to use an ABLE account. So he is able to deposit that money either into his existing pooled trust, or because he's under the age of 65, he does have the option of opening up his own standalone special needs trust. Now, with that, just a reminder that our next webinar is being hosted on Thursday, August 17th from 11 to 12, same time. And it's about how to qualify for community Medicaid in 2023. So we are going to be having, we are excited to be inviting a member of the Piero, Connor and Strauss elder law firm. Frank Hemming will be joining me to talk about how to qualify for Medicaid, preserve family assets, how to plan for the need for Medicaid benefits, and we'll also be talking about how the pooled trust helps you become financially eligible when you're in need of those Medicaid services. So we encourage you to join us and also go to our website for links to register for that training.